I think I am.
Yeah, I think so.
So as the chair, I'd like to call the meeting of the San Anselmo Flood Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. It's been a long time, and it's nice to see everyone. I think I think we'll go around and introduce ourselves again, just to say hello, if that's okay. So I'm Kathy Schaefer, and I am a PhD student at UC Davis. And let's see, Dimitri.
My name is Dmitry Laptev. I'm a project coordinator for San Anselmo Public Works, and I'm just here to make sure that the meeting is running well.
Thank you. And then Scott.
Scott Schneider, Assistant Public Works Director, Town of San Anselmo.
Maribel.
Maribel de la Cruz, Assistant Engineer with the town.
Eric.
Assume it's Eric Stromberg because I talked first. Eric,
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Eric Stromberg, landscape architect on the flood committee.
Eric, number 2.
Volunteer member of the flood committee.
Yeah, Gerhard.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gerhard. I am no longer working for the County of Marin. I started working for GHD about 4 months ago. So I'm a member of Raymond Wong's team and doing a little work on the Lower Coromandel Creek project.
So you went to the dark side. Okay.
Yeah.
Glenn.
Glenn Dirk, consulting civil engineer.
Vlad.
Nope, I'm here.
And Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Freeman. I'm the building official with San Anselmo.
That's great. Thank you.
So Kathy, are we supposed to have council members? How does that normally work?
Yeah,
Usually we do.
Yeah, we do. I think there's supposed to be a council.
Yeah, we invited Steve Bruto and Paul Green. They were sent links to join as panelists. I guess they're not here.
Do we have to have a council member present in order to have an official meeting?
I'm not quite sure about that. I know that at least we probably have to have one liaison with the town council. I don't know. Do you know anything about this, Scott? They need to be present in order to see.
I don't know what the rules are about that. I know that they like to be involved, so they know what's going on, but I don't know that it's required.
Well, let's assume that it's not, and that we can go ahead and move forward. So I think the first item of business is to approve the minutes of October 21st, a year ago. So do we have anyone want to comment on the minutes? Any corrections or additions or comments? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I read them and thought they looked good, so I move we approve the minutes.
Anyone second the motion?
I second.
And okay, so what's the protocol? Everyone to approve? Is there?
The clap hands.
Oh, is that the protocol? Okay. So if you, all those who favor approving the minutes, please raise your hand. And I think we have everyone approving, so thank you. And the next item on our agenda is an update on the San Anselmo flood risk project. And I am assuming, Scott, you're going to give that in absence of Sean?
Yes, so Sean wanted to apologize for not being available tonight. He's dealing with a personal family matter right now. So he asked me to step in. So the town has been coordinating with the county on their flood risk reduction project, which entails removing the the structure of Building Bridge 2 in downtown San Anselmo. A couple years ago, it seems like not that long ago, but when we had the first COVID shutdown, the town worked with the county to remove the existing buildings that were on top of the platform at 634 to 636 San Anselmo Avenue. And we created a temporary park there that worked really well when we had all the restaurants shut down for COVID. So the county's moving forward with their project. They're dealing now with some issues with FEMA and the no rise requirement. So when they remove the foundation of Building Bridge 2, they will keep a little more water in the creek and less water in the street, but that creates a rise in the creek of, I think it's between 0 and 4 inches. And so they're working on how to mitigate that. And since they're not going to be able to complete the mitigations before the project is constructed, they've designed a baffle to be installed temporarily in the same area that keeps the flow rates the same in the creek. And so, which means it doesn't help with flooding until such time as they mitigate all the impacts from the downstream areas, and then they can pull that baffle out and achieve the flood reduction. And so it's very nitpicky working with FEMA, and but the county's dealing with all that, and they're still on schedule for construction next summer. And then the town is working to put in a new park after they're done. And so the town has secured $400,000 of donations to start the design process. And we hope to eventually end up with get $3 or $4 million worth of donations to complete the park. And the new park would tie on to what the county project leaves us, which would be a plaza on the San Anselmo Avenue side, and then enhanced park throughout the redwoods on the Creek Park side, replaced stage and grass area, and possibly some seat walls in there. And so the Creekside Commons Community or Citizens Advisory Committee has been holding public meetings, and we had one a couple weeks ago where the consultant showed us some preliminary designs. And so we've had some outreach meetings in the park this summer. And there's a nice board up in the park that you can go look at, and it explains kind of the process with that. So we're hoping to be poised to flow right in with our construction when the county's completed with their construction, which should be about this time next year.
Sounds good. That's great. I was wondering if they had gotten their issues with FEMA resolved. I had a conversation with them about, kind of how to approach FEMA with this no rise thing. And anyway, so it sounds like they have it resolved. They have the issue resolved, and they're able to move forward, even if
they haven't resolved it. They have a game plan, and they're working towards that with the baffle scheme. And so that should alleviate the no rise issues, but then they have issues with the baffle, and that has a little bit of upstream impact on the Creekside Pizza building. And so they're working on how to deal with that and address that as part of the project.
So Scott, is the Fairfax detention basin alleviate that issue? So is that the problem, the timing between those two projects? Or even when the Fairfax basin is in, are we still out of compliance with no rise?
The Fairfax basin is so far away that it doesn't have an impact for us. That basin will really protect downtown Fairfax and increase the size of a storm before they start flooding downtown. Right now, I think it's a 6-year storm similar to us. And it should bring it up to 10, 15 with the eventual, with some bridge work there. I think their goal is to get up to the 25-year storm and keep all the water in the creek.
But so
um,
that, there's no attenuation of flow all the way down into San Anselmo for now. huh?
no.
Okay, I was thinking that was connected. All right.
So they're connected in that it's the same funding source, which is the Transformed Memorial Park Detention Basin grant, and that they were looked at together in terms of the impacts and the mitigations and additional, bank enhancement and things like that. So they're really joined at the hip project wise, but not hydraulically.
All right.
Hmm.
So I guess then the next question is, and I realize this is this county's project, but what is the long-term plan then to remove those baffles? Like, what do we need to do now to actually get no rise? Is that?
So you can have a rise if you mitigate any impacts from that rise. So they're analyzing the downstream impacts right now. We have a lot of commercial buildings downstream from Building Bridge 2 in the downtown San Anselmo area. And then once you get across Sir Francis Drake, there's a few more commercial buildings and a lot of residential homes all the way down into Ross. And so they're working with different homeowners and figuring out exactly what the impact is and how to mitigate that. It can vary, it really depends on where the existing 100-year flow is, and then where it would be after the project, and then what does that impact? If both of those before and after project are below the finished floor, but it affects their utilities, if they have a furnace underneath their house or something like that, then that's something that to mitigate. But if the existing house already has a finished floor below the 100-year level and then it gets worse, then it's tricky trying to determine to what extent did the project cause additional impacts, and how will those impacts be mitigated and accepted by the homeowner, and work through all. So, and that's why, dealing with each homeowner, we wouldn't want one issue that gets a little more complicated to hold up the whole project. And so that's why they're moved to the baffle, to give them more time to deal with that. And then once they can work out all those impacts and mitigations, then they can remove the baffle and achieve the goals of the project.
Sounds like a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, dealing with, having to address the needs on a homeowner by homeowner basis is a challenge. But yeah. Well, that's good. It sounds though that it's moving along. My concern has always been, are they going to be able to get the project done before the funding expires? Are they still on track with the funding? Do you know?
They say they are. One of the things that, several years ago, the funding was supposed to run out December of 2020. They got that extended to 2021, and then now to the December of 2022. So I'm not sure, how challenging it is to get it extended if they need it. But I think everybody's trying to move forward as efficiently as they can, given all the different impacts and constraints.
Yeah.
And then Kathy, I want to make sure that you give a chance if we have two attendees, if they want to raise their hand and if they have any questions as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Actually, before we do, Kathy, just another question, Scott, for you in terms of the timing with the Fairfax detention basin. So you may not know the answer to this, but I know that they still need to put in the spillway connection, and the project's not done. So is that, do you have a sense of the update on that? I was assuming that these were connected projects hydraulically too. So I was thinking you would have a vested interest in knowing when that detention basin went online, but maybe you don't pay attention.
Yeah, so I've been following it as a citizen, but not, we haven't been discussing it in our roles with the town and the county. But I think they're on the same schedule. They're moving forward with permitting, and their goal is to get that constructed this summer or next summer as well.
So these projects also weren't the bridge replacements part, sort of part of this as well? Not really part of it, but contributing to the reduction in the flooding. What's the status on the bridge projects?
So we have many bridge projects that we're working on right now. The farthest ones along are Madrone Avenue and Nokomis Avenue, and they're upstream of downtown San Anselmo. And so those ones we hope to finalize the environmental impacts and get that all worked out. I think next spring, and then work into final design. And I think we're hoping to construct in the summer of 2023 with those. And then we also have the Bridge Avenue Bridge and the Center Boulevard Bridge, which are just upstream of downtown. And those ones are a little farther out. We've been fighting with Caltrans and the Highway Bridge Program to join those two projects together. They were two separate projects, two separate timelines with funding. And so we've been able to, we've got agreements from Caltrans that they're going to combine them into one project and they'll be on one timeline. But they also have had problems with the Highway Bridge Program and the funding. And so almost every project is getting pushed out at least several years because the program has been oversubscribed. And so it's probably still 4, 5, 6, 7 years out before all those bridge projects can be constructed, but they were all analyzed together in the EIR for the Building Bridge 2 project.
Thank you. That's good. Did anyone have does any members have questions or additional questions? And does anyone from the public have any questions or comments?
Seeing none.
This is Gerhard. I have a question is, if like the Madrone Nokomis bridges go forward, has there been discussion about baffling those as well?
No, because they were analyzed together as part of the overall project. So that hasn't come up yet, but that's probably a good question for the hydraulic consultant Stetson to make sure, because at one time, the county was looking at analyzing everything in the watershed as one program and looking at it as the reasonable foreseeable future, which was projects such as bridges that have been, identified for Highway Bridge Program funding or grant funding, like Building Bridge 2 and the Fairfax Detention Basin. And so things that were, had a reasonable chance of moving forward. And so that's what they were looking at, and not looking, 50 years down the road at, other things that might happen. And so that was the way that they were analyzing all these projects. And it's only come up recently with the FEMA no rise issue about that one project. So, I'll have to ask them and ask Stetson what it means. And, I'm assuming that all the mitigations that happen for the Building Bridge 2 project, since they were analyzed, as one hydraulic model with all the bridges fixed upstream, that the impacts would already be addressed. And I think it's probably one of those things that if you did one bridge at a time, it raises an inch there. And then if you didn't do that one, but you did another bridge, then it's an inch over here. And if you did Building Bridge 2, then it's, 2 inches over there. And combined, if it's 3 or 4 inches and then that's mitigated, then it should cover all the future work. So I think that was the way they analyzed it.
That makes sense. Thanks. Another question. Do you happen to know if like Caltrans funds the bridge program through any of the funding that would come from this federal infrastructure bill that's being discussed? Would that move things along faster?
I don't think so. I haven't heard exactly what the infrastructure bill would be, but I would assume they would just fund add additional funds to the Highway Bridge Program. And the Highway Bridge Program, I think it's funded with federal gas tax. And then on our Nokomis Bridge, since it's a local bridge, Caltrans pays for the local match with with RM3 funds, which I think are the additional bridge toll funds that we pay when we go over the Golden Gate Bridge or the Richmond Bridge. So yeah, I'm not sure how the infusion of a new federal stimulus bill would affect that. But in my experience, nothing ever speeds up. It just slows down, gets more complicated.
Oh, a public comment from Bill, if you want to take that.
That would be great.
All right, Bill, you should now be able to unmute yourself. Bill.
Hey, it's Kathleen and Bill. We live in the Winship Park neighborhood, and thanks for all the interesting update information. We're just curious to know where the Winship Bridge replacement might fit into this, and if you know anything about the status of that project. Thanks.
So that's a great question. So the Winship Bridge is in Ross, and so the town of Ross is working on that one. As I understand, they had funding issues with the Highway Bridge Program, and so they're trying to figure out how to continue to fund the design. I think they're in the environmental phase now and work through that and to finalize the design, and then they would be eligible for construction funding after that. But they're not going to be constructing next summer as they originally were hoping, and so hopefully it'll be the summer of 2022. But I haven't heard lately how their funding issues have been going with the preliminary design and environmental phases of that project.
Thank you. All right. No further comments from anyone? Okay, well,
No public comment.
not hearing any further comments, I'll go ahead and close that item and open a status on the Marin flood control projects. I was supposed to have a status and I must apologize. I don't really have much. I don't know, Maribel, do you have any, or is there any other comments on the Marin flood control projects in general?
I don't have anything for the item.
Yeah, Gerhard, you may have some information on the county project down in Ross and the unincorporated area down in Kentfield.
Yeah, I can give a little update on that. So the other old Prop 1E grant that was supposed to go to Phoenix Lake Detention Basin was migrated down to the Corte Madera Creek concrete channel area. And the county, I think in August, approved the environmental impact report for that big project. So it includes opening up removing the bottom of the concrete channel, like downstream from the Stadium Way footbridge in College of Marin area. Some flood walls along the like sort of stacked on the top of the existing concrete channel wall in some places through the college campus. Moving upstream, a pump station in the Granton Park neighborhood of Kentfield, which is right next to College of Marin, the L triangle next to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And then removing the fish ladder in the town of Ross. It's like the transition into the Army Corps Unit 4 has always been like a major sort of high priority project for the watershed. And the town of Ross, as part of the environmental impact process, lobbied heavily to not remove or to not include like removing the upstream end of the concrete channel. So that was an idea that was like the main alternative in the EIR was to restore what is called Fred Allen Park. That's like upstream from the tennis courts in Ross along the concrete channel. And so that's not being done. The town of Ross just wanted to focus on specifically the concrete, the fish ladder removal. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a big wooden bulkhead that goes across the creek about 3 feet high, where the natural creek ends and the concrete channel starts. And so that transition and that whole series of projects is also on this timeline, like the SAFER project to get to construction next summer. So there's like a whole lot of a flurry of activity trying to get it, the plans to 100% design, and I guess all the FEMA and permitting and local review done for construction next summer. That's what I know about that.
Thank you. Any?
Gerhard, do you know if the regulatory permit's been submitted, like to Water Board and Army Corps and everything? It's gonna be that far along.
Yeah, I think they've been submitted. I mean, I can't say that for certain, but I know that all those agencies have been in those conversations all the way along. So I don't think there's any, hopefully there's no last minute surprises, but I don't think that there's any like real gnarly critical path items that I know of about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, any other comments? All right. So we'll move on to the update on the community rating system. So Maribel, kick it off.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update about the CRS. So this year, August, we were recertified as a class 9. That means that currently residents in the floodplain. And I think actually everyone in town receives a 5% discount in their flood insurance premiums. We also had our cycle visit last month. And I'm still working with the CRS specialist to get more activities submitted. And I have a deadline for next week. And then next week, they're gonna, after that deadline, means we close and activities will be reviewed. I'm trying to get more points, and I'm hoping to get to a class 8, which will give residents an additional 5%, giving them a total of 10% in the flood insurance savings. And also, I wanted to talk to you about the PPI. I would like to probably get more information from you or more engagement. You probably noticed or saw the attachment that I had in the staff report about the PPI document. I don't know if you have any comments or any changes, edits, or something I should add. I think, or I'm shooting or hoping to get at least 80 points for public information, public outreach. This is mostly flyers that we have out there, emails that we sent out, and just disseminating information about flooding and get the public to be more aware of the importance of having flood insurance.
If I recall correctly, one of the key points was to have someone in the insurance sector be part of our committee. Have we, and we haven't been able to find anyone who's an insurance person who's wanted to be on our committee. So I'll just kind of toss that out. If there's anyone who knows it, if you have an insurance person, it would be great if we could find someone who'd be willing to join the committee in some form or fashion, however that's
Isn't that you, Kathy?
possible.
Aren't you getting your PhD in flood insurance?
No, but I'm not an insurance person, so you have to be, but yes, it is, yeah. But I do have, the other part is I do have a CFM, and so you get points for that, and I am authorized to proctor a CFM exam. So if anyone wants to go for their CFM, let me know. I'm happy to proctor. Maribel and Vlad. So anytime you want, let me know.
What are the requirements for that?
I'm sorry, what, Maribel?
What are the requirements for that CFM license or certification?
You have to take a test.
Just a test.
It's just basically a test, and if you pass the test, you have the CFM. Then there is a requirement for continuing education requirements. So the city would have to send you on occasion to the FMA conference or one of the other conferences, which it would be not a bad thing. And the test, I think, if I remember correctly, is about 2 hours. It's not particularly difficult, but you do have to know the FEMA regulations on building requirements and things. So, but I could help you study that.
Sure. Yeah, something to look forward to, or maybe in the future.
Yeah, it would help the city if we had someone that.
Can I make a comment?
Yes,
This is
please.
Gerhard. I looked at the document. I thought it looked good. But I just like over the course of that storm Sunday a week ago, I just heard some of the same old misinformation being repeated about like the tides are going to change in 3 hours and that's when our flooding will stop. So I think it would be a really good thing to hammer into our program for public information that like maybe that's true in Ross or Kentfield, but that's not true in San Anselmo. And the other thing that I always hear is that, oh, back in 2005, like MMWD opened up the floodgates below Bontempi and flooded us, or that kind of thing. It's like something about Phoenix Lake is the only reservoir in our watershed. It's downstream from us. It's not actively managed for flood control. So we don't experience like any kind of reservoir changes except for this detention basin in Fairfax or something. But those two things I always hear. These old timers just can't get it out of their head. So those would be good. I don't know, just add that to the messaging.
Okay.
Yeah, I second the one about the tides. Even I live in Fairfax, and people up in Fairfax are talking about how we're going to flood because of high tides. And there's some clever ways we can explain it, I think, to folks that they will get that. Okay, yes, certainly downstream that's an issue, but we've got a lot of infrastructure in the way to make us not affected by the tides.
What do you think about should we make a flyer? Should we put in our town newsletters, or how should we disseminate the information?
I think actually having, if you have any information about this last storm and the newsletter, which is probably a great spot, I think that is a broad net, and just having a quick little blurb that we're not affected by the tides, I think would be actually a nice low-hanging fruit piece to add. So at least people have heard it.
Yeah,
and explain why right away, but I think just letting them know that that's the answer, and then we can explain why to the people who care.
Like somewhere in that PPI, it's got like what the messages are, and somewhere slip it in there so that it gets on repeat, like every year, every couple of years, it just goes out again. Like the best way that I understand it is that in Ross, when it's at any time there's like a waterfall at that fish ladder. I mean, it's like a hydraulic jump, but it's like such enough of a vertical difference that the water is falling into the concrete channel. So and that's above the tide line. So the tide is not going to be backing up any water. Lagunitas Bridge or Winship Bridge or any of the bridges are not experiencing it upstream from that hydraulic jump.
Okay. That's good. I can get that out.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's a challenge. So yeah, before COVID, I was working on getting a model, a virtual reality model where you could, it was going to be the size of a big fish tank, and it was going to have the city of, kind of the, they were going to use 3D printing technology to print the buildings, and you'd be able to, show that. But post-COVID, I'm thinking we don't want kids playing and touching things. But anyway, maybe someday in the future we'll go down that path again. Anyway, and the other thing that we had talked about pre-COVID was having maybe monthly getting together on a Saturday morning and just picking certain pieces of the CRS program and seeing if those of us who are can be a little worker bees. I think it's still a little early with COVID, and I think we're still trying to get back into things, but maybe later on, maybe early next year, we can rethink about having that. I mean, I think there was interest by everyone to occasionally volunteer some time to pick some things that we as, you know, as committee members could do to help increase the points, so.
But what I can do, Kathy, probably, you know, have a list of things, and then I can send it out, and maybe you can decide which one, or you can pick one. Everyone wants one, and then you can have that way.
Yeah, we could do that. The other one, just as I was going through the CRS book, just briefly, does our ordinance include the requirement that equipment and the equipment piece be elevated a foot above freeboard? Does it?
Yes, we had a revision to the existing ordinance that requires 1 foot freeboard for machinery and utility equipment to be raised 1 foot above the VFB. So yeah, that's a requirement to be class to be part of the class 8. So that was the first thing that was pointed out to us by the CRS specialist, and that's been taken care of.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anyone from the public have a question or comment?
Seeing no hands raised.
I'm sorry.
Seeing no hands raised from the public.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then moving on to risk rating 2.0, and I would like to just share my screen briefly. Let me just make sure I have the right. So while I'm looking for the file, FEMA has a new methodology for pricing the risk, and please tell me I didn't close. No, I did not. Good. Let me just share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen. Starting October 1st.
I don't think we can see a screen yet.
Give it just a minute. It's starting to fill in. Do you see it?
Nope, still looking at all the panelists.
Oh, it's not. How's that? Is it coming together?
Nope, still only seeing us.
There's no screen sharing
Yeah, it didn't.
turned on. It's not even blank.
Oh, there it is.
There you go.
Okay. So FEMA, and I apologize, I did have it centered on San Anselmo here. Starting October 1st, FEMA is changing the way that it prices flood insurance policies. It's a new methodology called Risk Rating 2.0. And it is fundamentally different from the way that it has priced risk in the past. It uses the same technology that private insurers use. So it is based not on a FEMA map, but it is based on a suite of catastrophe models. So the FEMA map that we've just had machinations about what to do with, going forward, the only time that the FEMA map will be used is for building requirements or to determine if someone has to purchase flood insurance. If they are within a FEMA flood zone, then and they have a federally backed mortgage, then they are required to buy flood insurance. But other than that, at that point forward, it gets thrown away, and this new suite of catastrophe models are then used to price the risk. In addition, they're using building stock information and incorporating the value of the home into the, so ultimately into the pricing of the risk. So this shows, you can see, I don't know if you can see here, let me, oops, wrong way. You can see San Anselmo here. I don't know if you can see my hand, but San Anselmo, about, whoops, crap, sorry. About 10% of the, 15% of the properties in San Anselmo are going to see their flood insurance prices go down. Let me see if I can get here to the button. Come on. I'll cut to the chase. There's about, we have about 15% of the policies are going to see an increase of about of more than $20 a month. So we have some properties that are going to see an increase. Ross is going to see, the handful of properties that are in Ross are going to see a significant increase. So I just want to make you aware of that. I'll turn off the screen sharing. These prices went into effect October 1st, and the arrangement is that if it's to the good and it's to benefit you, then you can take advantage of it. If it's going to be an increase, then you don't have to take advantage of it until, at this point, until April 1st. But there is substantial pushback by some of the members of Congress. So I think it's going to be kicked down the road some more. So the bottom line is that if it's to your advantage, then you can take advantage of it. If it's not to your advantage, then you can maintain the old rate, at least at this point until April 1st. I also want to just let you know that the NFIP, they did receive another extension. I think it's set to expire December 31st. There is movement. They do want to extend the program for 5 years, but I don't know how Congress is going to ultimately land on that. So I just wanted to just give everyone an update on risk rating 2.0. Any questions?
Is there a way to find out for ourselves, like what's making a rate go up or down? Like if you drill down on that website you had, for instance, or how do you know what underlying calculations were used?
If you Google it, there is a document produced by FEMA's actuary called Milliman, and it goes into sort of painstaking detail as to how they price the risk. But I believe that you'll be able. I believe that they have a spreadsheet that shows how all the different factors go in. I believe that spreadsheet's publicly available. I have a copy of it if you can't get it. The challenge is that you have to sort of start with what's the average annualized loss? What's the projected loss? And unfortunately, they're using an ensemble of catastrophe models, and some of those catastrophe models are proprietary. So you have no idea what your average annualized loss at your location is. And for city officials, the only way that you'll know, you no longer have the ability to know which properties are in this catastrophe model and how they're being rated. The only way that anyone knows what a price is that you have to contact your insurance, and you have to contact an insurance provider who then types the address into the system, and then they get the answer out. But, you know, you can no longer like look at a FEMA map and decide who's going to have to pay and what they're going to have to, what their rates may be. It's only insurance providers are authorized to have that information. Yeah. I mean, I think it is in the long run a good thing, but it certainly will have its challenges.
So the finished floor and the base floor elevations don't really matter anymore, or like?
They only matter for building restrictions. I take that back. They do matter, and for the risk rating 2.0. And if you do have an elevation certificate and you submit it to your insurer, it does get computed into the insurance, and you can get a reduction if you have an elevation certificate. Yeah.
Cool. So as you've been talking, I Googled it and the maps come up and it's crashed like 4 times on my machine, the ArcGIS map. And can you send us the link that you're using, or tell me what to Google?
Sure.
It looks like what you're using, but it's completely unusable performance wise, and it seems very like typical, but
yeah, it's typical FEMA.
That's unusable for me. I can't even zoom in. It's
let me see if I have.
So Eric, you're talking about the FEMA map.
The risk 2.0. It's an ArcGIS map. It looked just like her screen, but for whatever reason on my machine, it is using Google Chrome as the browser. It is crashing. Anyway, we don't need to spend the meeting troubleshooting my problems, but
I'll send Maribel some links, and she can
thank you.
Distribute them. Any questions?
That's very interesting, though. Thank you. I didn't know much about it, so.
I just have like an anecdotal comment, which is that in the last couple of years, it seems like I only hear about private flood insurance. Like I don't know if that has really changed because, you know, people of my generation are buying houses and I'm in the conversations now, but I wasn't really even aware of private flood insurance like 10 years ago. And now I don't even hear about NFIP flood insurance. It's just all, you know, out of, some other kind of insurance.
Yeah. And that's true. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you might not have heard of any private insurance, and the private market, the growth in the private market has just exploded. So a lot more options are available at the private market. And yes, they're very interested in moving into that space. What has made it all possible is about 2 years ago, Congress passed a law that said that if an insurance company issued a policy and the wording on the policy, there was very special wording, if it had this very special wording on it, then lenders were required to accept it. And that was a big change, because in the past, there was a lot of concern about whether or not a lender would accept a private flood insurance policy. And with this law, they changed that. And with that change, a lot of private flood has come into the market, which is a good thing.
Kathy, I have a question. Some time ago, I think you had talked about helping or encouraging homeowners to get elevation certificates if it might reduce their flood insurance. So it sounds like, is that still possible, or is that?
Yeah, I think it's still a good thing, and it's still possible. We did some colleagues of mine at Davis looked at what the flood depths were and looked at the ground elevation for homes in the Morningside area. And we have a list of those homes that we think or that the data suggests they would receive at the time, they would receive a benefit by having a flood insurance certificate, right? So there, at the time, the question was, is it worth the money to get an elevation certificate? Or is it going to just show that, you know, it's not going to help you? And so we have that list. I have it somewhere, and I think I gave it to Maribel. I think we submitted it. It's probably in your files somewhere.
I do have the map, the different areas, but I don't remember seeing a list.
This was one, I can send it to you.
Okay.
But now I think that the story has changed in that I would say that if you are purchasing an NFIP policy and you have the ability to get an elevation certificate, it probably would help you. But you'd have to, it's kind of a case by case, and you'd want to talk to your insurance provider to see if that would help. But we do have that information. I'll make a note to send it to you. Any other questions? Any questions from the public?
Not seeing any hands raised.
All right. And let's see, I've moved my screens here, so I'm not sure what's the next thing on the agenda. I apologize. Oh, the governor's latest $15 billion budget addendum. I attended a briefing several weeks ago, and the governor, because of the surplus, he had a number of priorities that he has instituted, a $15 billion budget change. A lot of the things are kind of for groundwater. A lot of them, you know, don't really apply, but there were some things in the proposal where they were talking about having some grant opportunities to develop stormwater management plans. And so even though we're sort of a flood committee and we talk about the main stem, one of the things that I have always wanted is for us to have in addition, have a stormwater plan, or what we often call pluvial flooding, right? The kind of the flooding from the streets and the culverts. And so I just wanted to let everyone, staff, to kind of be watching for that notices and kind of keep an eye out. And I will do so as well, but they haven't developed the grant programs yet, but they're the Office of Policy, Planning and Research, the Strategic Growth Council received a bunch of money, and I think DWR received a bunch of money. So there may be some opportunities. They're a little bit limited because I think a lot of the opportunities are targeting low income and environmental justice communities. But because we're a small community, there was also some targeted for small communities. So maybe we can get something in there. So just to kind of let you know, there may be some opportunities. Also, there's funding through the BRIC program for different things too. They require a local cash match, but if there are things that stormwater things that we want to see done, we could do that. And there is funding, I think, for a stormwater master plan. If we wanted to go forward with that, there might be funding. So I'll just sort of toss that out to the city staff for the good of the order. Any questions? Any comments from anyone?
I have a comment. When we were cleaning out the office a couple months ago, we found the 1970 stormwater master plan that was created, and then it was updated by George Davidson in 1987. And so he went through it and, marked what got changed, and he kind of reprioritized what he thought was the most important localized storm drain things to work on. And I've been going through it just the last couple days and reprioritizing again. And so I'm been looking at some potential projects, based on some of the issues we had from this last storm. And so one of those locations is right near the Fairfax border, where we have to put out flooding signs on Sir Francis Drake. And so looking at what improvements Fairfax has made in the last couple of years, and then tying into that. And so that might be a fairly substantial project that, hopefully we'd be able to either get grant money for, or we could use the federal money, the ARP money that's been designated for us. And but I'm trying to refine that, and then some other locations around town that have some of our more mundane flooding, where a little rainstorm gets water in the streets and things like that. So as I review that and come up with some ideas, we'll bring it back through the flood committee, as well as through our capital program and monitoring committee, as well as our financial advisory committee, and eventually to the council, and see how they want to prioritize the use of any funds, or prioritize different projects that we would then go after grant money for.
That's good. Yeah, and I'll continue to keep my eye out if I see a grant that might be. There is also interest in these grants that are, using low impact design kinds of, encouraging infiltration with our, by having more low impact design and our complete streets program and that kind of thing. Okay, any comments last time? No comments?
I have a quick comment. Sorry, jumping in so much here. But this might seem kind of crazy, but Scott, I've always thought that, if we really need detention and we really want to come up with like a really detailed master plan for the town of San Anselmo, we could use like restricting storm drain orifice sizes to only handle certain capacities based on the contributing area, so that the streets intentionally flood to keep it out of the creek. You want to probably be able to adjust that, but I think we've come a long way since the 70s and the 80s, where we're just trying to get the water into the creek as fast as possible. And I think as a last resort, we could intentionally flood certain streets.
Yeah.
If we know how to do it right.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's sort of the standard practice in many areas, that the streets convey at least the 50-year. And so that's not uncommon. And I've thought that as well. So, well, Scott, yeah, maybe after you've had a chance to look at it, maybe, next meeting we can have some conversations, or I'll reach out to you too. Maybe I'd like to see it. It would be kind of interesting. So, okay. Any other comments? Hearing none. Moving on to the atmospheric river storm response. So I have a video. I went down and went to the coffee shop and stood across the creek at the peak. So if you want a video, I've got it. But I'd like to hear how did we do overall?
Yeah, so going into the storm, obviously a few days in advance, we hear a lot of stuff on the news about atmospheric river, and everything that I saw was, 6, maybe 8 inches. And it turned out we got over 10 inches of rain. And it really, how we do, in terms of flooding really depends on how quickly it comes and what's the intensity. Because you get 10 inches of rain over 2 days, it's no big deal, but so on Sunday we had our crews on standby. Sean and I were driving around. We were, looking at localized things, getting leaves out of catch basins and making sure things were running. And then we had several large trees fall. And luckily they did not fall on any structures, but we did have to yellow tag some houses in the Brookside neighborhood right near Vlad's house because there was half of a tree that fell and broke a bunch of fences, and luckily it didn't fall into the creek because that would have really caused some problems for a lot of the neighbors with flooding. But there was a lot of the tree that still was remaining standing that could fall in any direction. And so we had 4 different houses we yellow tagged and told them, don't sleep in your back bedroom. Some houses lost power, some had lost water because the tree broke one of their hose bibs in their yard. And so they couldn't shut the water off except for turning it off at the meter. So we were dealing with those kind of issues. And then we saw that the creek was rising much faster than anybody expected. We thought with the empty creek and with dry soil that a lot of the water would soak in. But we had the creek rising very quickly. So we put the floodgates in at town hall. We were monitoring it very closely. Our town manager and assistant town manager were on the phone with their counterparts in Ross and in Fairfax. And I think about the same time that Fairfax was starting to see a little bit of water pop out of the creek, Sean was at the intersection at Sycamore Avenue. And, I think at this point, the water had already breached at Nokomis. And so Gerhard, it was in your neighborhood. And there's still, some mud on the streets there. I'm not sure how deep it got, but I'm guessing, maybe a foot and a half or something there. And then Sean noticed that it was breaching at the intersection of Center Boulevard, Sycamore. So just upstream of the Great Acorn Building and upstream of the fire station. And so at that point, he called into our town manager and said, it's starting to come out now. And so all the 3 town managers agreed it was time to blow the flood horn. And so we did that, and the horn worked great. And one of the problems with the horn is, we have 3 sets of 5 bursts, and whoever's running that, if they hold it too long, they can use up all the air in the tank. And so you got to be careful how long you hold each little blast. And so we had our assistant town manager doing it. She did a great job. And, we had consistent sound through all 15 blasts. And then, I think that was about 3:45. And so we closed downtown. We had already alerted all of the business owners that they should come down and, consider putting in their floodgates. And so everybody had been doing that up until that time. It was a lot of onlookers that came downtown. And once we did sound the flood horn, we had the police department going up and down, with their flashing lights, trying to get everybody to leave. And there were still new people coming into town. And some of the police officers were a little frustrated in that they would say, "Excuse me, downtown's closed." And someone would say, "Thank you," and walk right by and, go down to look at the flooding. So I'm not sure if that was you, Kathy.
No, it was not me. I came from the high side and I stayed away. I was like, I'm not going down.
But there's a lot of people with their kids, and
Yeah.
I haven't been there when it does breach, and I don't know how fast it comes, but I've heard it's just a couple minutes, you could have a foot or 2 of water on the street. And if it's rushing, you can lose your footing and kids can get washed away. So it's really dangerous. And so it was a little frustrating not having the compliance there. But I think we really lucked out in that the intensity, it was still raining, but it just went down to a regular rain instead of the monsoon rains that was happening all morning. And so we avoided a major event. The county told me it was about a 5-year event. And it was my thought that, it's about a 6-year event that takes to fill the creek up, but it was plumb full. It was above the soffit of Building Bridge 2. So it was, in a pressure condition, pushing the water down under the platform. But it still had a foot or so to get up to the bottom of Creekside Pizza building, because that building's much higher. But it was plumb full, and if it didn't stop raining, then we could have had some major problems. So in that case, we were really lucky. Like I said, we had a number of trees go down around town. We had some of the normal flooding that we've seen, like on Ross Avenue, the storm, there's a little storm drain on Ross Avenue close to San Anselmo Avenue that never really accepts all the rain from these heavy storms. And then we had some, water on the sidewalk. So it's what people would consider flooding, if they're driving around or, walking on the sidewalk and having, water in their shoes. That's what some people consider flooding. I know, to Gerhardt's point, with using the streets as detention, I consider flooding when it's inside somebody's house, where it's really affecting their property, versus, their car tires are getting wet or whatever. And so, we had a little bit of flooding on Ross Avenue. Bolinas Avenue, we heard some reports there that it worked really well. We put with a conjunction with Town of Ross, we put a 48-inch storm drain in Bolinas Avenue up to Richmond Road. And we heard that worked really well. They used to, small 2-year storm, they would have water over the sidewalk. So I think that worked well, even though from what I hear, the elevation of the creek when it's full is the same as the elevation of Richmond Road intersection. So no matter how big of a pipe you put out there, you might still have some localized flooding there. But I think the goal obviously is to make sure that the water doesn't get into people's homes, and do it as best we can up until the 100-year event when it follows the FEMA maps and does what it does. So I think overall we pretty lucky with the kind of storm we had, a 5-year storm, but it's a lot of stress to go through a 5-year storm, which is, we're trying to get out of that by doing some of these flood control projects so that not every atmospheric river is suddenly all hands on deck, let's close down downtown.
Yeah. No, I came downtown, but I came in from the side so I could, because I have a fear about having the street in downtown flooding, and while we do, kind of carry some flooding in the street, the velocity of that, going just scares me to death that somebody is going to be in the street. And in the past, there's been all kinds of people, and so I was really pleased to see that the police were evacuating everybody, and they were blocking it off with tape and having everyone. And so when I was down there, they had kind of gotten rid of everybody, and I was breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I mean, it was much less attended than in past events, so that's good. But it's still, just seeing 5 or 10 people down there, is really stressful because, if it kept raining, they could get washed away, and that'd be the last we'd see of them. So
yeah,
that'd be interesting to hear what other people experience, like Gerhard, at your place and in other neighborhoods, and what people saw out there.
Yeah, can I show you guys? Can I show a picture?
Yeah.
Madrone legit flooded. So screen broadcast. I want to share my screen. How do I do this? You guys seeing anything different here?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. You see my desktop here?
Yes.
Yep.
This is looking across Madrone Avenue at my house.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
So it's not super deep, but we were really fortunate that we didn't, like my house didn't flood very badly, but neighbors on either side with with basements and low garages lost a lot of stuff. I mean, I think because nobody was anticipating it. There were just dumpsters of, flood damaged debris getting carted away, which just hurt my heart. Yeah, last week to see it all getting tossed. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the assessment that Scott just gave. Phoenix Lake was really low, and then full. but I think it was probably filling for most of it. So I don't,
So I did in a second, I'll present, I did a calculation on that. So.
oh, cool. Okay. Because I'm worried that the county is underestimating the return interval based on the Ross gauge or the gauge at Lagunitas Creek because they're not accounting for the fact that Ross Creek wasn't contributing very much flow. Like this is the highest we've seen the water in the 10 years that I've lived here. And so I suspect that at least farther upstream, it was a bigger storm than what we saw, or than what the county thinks. One other quick anecdote is that we've seen a bunch of steelhead in the creek since then. With the clean flows, there's been like salmonids all the way up to at least as far as Lansdale. I saw 2 swimming past my house a couple days ago. So that's, I guess, a silver lining.
That's great. It's happening in a lot of streams all over. Sonoma Creek's got Chinook. Their fish are enjoying this flow. So that is a benefit for sure.
Cool.
So I have 4 quick things to mention. The Phoenix Lake will be the last one because I did some calcs. I was curious about that too, Gerhard. So first, Scott, and for everyone, one of my issues I've always had is us blowing sirens for all 3 towns in some kind of show of unity, which I don't think it works. And then I talk to neighbors who are not doing what I'm doing, and they clearly don't understand the significance of the siren. So one, in terms of CRS, I think getting a message out of what the siren actually means doesn't mean come down to the creek. It means something that should be. Just blaring a siren just makes people more stressed out, but it doesn't actually result in action necessarily. And if it should, then we should communicate that to the public. But all of my neighbors, I'm in Fairfax, when the siren went off, I didn't even know it was because it was flooding and it was going to come down to my house, or it just meant San Anselmo was flooding. And I love you guys in San Anselmo, but I don't need to know at my house the very instant San Anselmo is flooding because it doesn't affect me. So I would think that we should really consider the use of the sirens and how and what their intent is, because it doesn't, for me to live in Fairfax and know it's flooding with a siren in San Anselmo doesn't help. But if I know that siren is ringing because it's about to flood San Anselmo, that's different. So anyway, something I think we should consider. The other thing is, so Roger Leventhal at the county, he worked up the hydrology for the storm, and I think just interesting stats here that are consistent with what Scott said. So if you looked at the 12-hour recurrence interval, the storm and I think he looked at the Kentfield gauge, which of course, gets saturated, but that was roughly a 200-year storm event for 12-hour rainfall intensity. So no surprise, it was just an atmospheric river that just kind of didn't stop, which is so unusual, and it just kind of hit us hard. But then if you start looking at the 1 hour, the 30-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute, 1-minute intensities, those are like 1-year storms, 1.5-year storm, 2-year storm. We didn't get a big downpour. That's unusual. We just got a steady rain for 12 hours. So if we had at any time a big downpour that came in, in the afternoon between noon to 4, it would have been a lot worse. But we just kind of lucked out in that case that we didn't really get that big downpour. In fact, I'm in the flood zone. I would sandbag. I didn't sandbag until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because similar to Scott, I was like, oh, it's first rain. It's not going to be that bad. And then I looked at the radar. I was like, okay, there's a big yellow plume coming. We're going to get nailed. And, miraculously for the 4th time since I've lived here, didn't quite flood Fairfax, but it got darn close. So anyway, that was my experience with that. So Phoenix Lake, I was curious because I knew, Gerhard, you know this, but I just put in a project at Shady Lane to remove the sanitary sewer there. And that was done like 2 weeks before the storm. So I was paying attention to that, and knew that Phoenix Lake was empty, and then it spilled about 2 or 3. They had a power outage. They don't know exactly when it happened, but using let me share screens now. So using MMWD's data, they have a total capacity of 410 acre feet. They were at 89 acre feet before the storm. So that's 310 acre feet that filled in Phoenix Lake with the storm. And so I was like, well, okay, that's clearly a large detention basin. How did that fit in with the process? And so not getting into the detail, I can send you this if you guys want to see it, but I just wanted to record my methodology so I could explain it to people later. But basically what I did is said, okay, at time zero, we had 89 acre feet in the Phoenix Lake. At 2 or 3 in the afternoon, we had 410 acre feet. So we just held back 321 acre feet within that time period. Then I used the hydrograph to say, okay, let's distribute that volume into Ross Creek as if it was a detention basin, and then add it into the Ross Creek hydrograph, which is this.
We can't see your screen.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. No. Oh, man.
No, not yet.
Really? Sorry, guys. Why does, oh, because there's a share button on the bottom that I gotta hit.
There we go.
Thank you.
So this is the hydrograph, which the blue is what was actually recorded, and then the orange is me adding on the timing of Phoenix Lake. And grain of salt here, this is a first cut. It hasn't been QA'd, but look, I think I've double checked it a few times. I think we're onto something a little bit. Clearly it shows one thing which is interesting. Phoenix Lake filled between 2 and 3, which is just about the time the creek peaked too. And that is coincidental. That's not because of Phoenix Lake doing something to our peak flows. It just happens to be the volume was used up at around the same time. So it could have been worse if Phoenix Lake had stopped filling earlier. But this is about a 500 CFS increase in flow that we would have seen about 20 minutes to 30 minutes earlier. And I'm maybe using more precision than this exercise warrants. There's some fuzzy numbers here that we should think about. But if you take those fuzzy numbers all the way to water surface elevations, that could be a 1 to 1.2 foot elevation rise at the Corte Madera gauge, which again, I have not looked to see what that does to flooding and how far up in San Anselmo it goes. But seeing Gerhardt's pictures, I think that Phoenix Lake, we were very, very lucky that Phoenix Lake was empty at that point in time in terms of flooding. I'm looking at this, it seems pretty certain to me in this storm with all these variables that were pretty unique, that Phoenix Lake played a huge role in reducing flooding. So I've shared this with the county, with Roger and Sean. I sent it to Sean and I sent it to Rich at Ross because I knew he was interested in it. But if anyone else wants to see that spreadsheet, I certainly will send it off to you guys, can kind of get feedback on it. But I do think it's a valuable exercise, and I may not be certain that it's one foot of rise that we got saved from, but I'm definitely certain that it reduced the peak to a significant level. Anyway, for what it's worth.
Interesting. So yeah, that presents some opportunities. We have the system that that tracks the atmospheric river as it's coming, the APQI system. That's what I was trying to remember. APQI. And they're using the APQI system for forecast informed reservoir operations at Lake Mendocino. And they have found that they are able to get, I don't remember the numbers, but I want to say something like a 40% more storage out of the Lake Mendocino by using forecast informed reservoir, because Lake Mendocino has both a designated water supply and flood control, whereas Phoenix Lake, I think, is purely just water supply. But it does suggest that at least a small, there's a small opportunity for some peak shaving with a forecast informed reservoir operation.
Yeah, so I know some folks here probably know more than I do, but I think that's basically why, the Phoenix Lakes Dam was why it was taken off the table, and that the fact geotechnically it's not going to hold up very well to wetting and drying. So why, I don't know the reason why Phoenix Lake was drawn down so much. I wouldn't, but It was, and then it filled, and they weren't anticipating that, I'm sure. So I can't imagine that this is an easy thing to do intentionally as a management purpose. I think that we would have kept the grant where it was if that's the case.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
But it helped us for sure. The storm. And it does, I mean, one thing I was also interested in is because there's such an anti-detention basin like feeling out here. You know, if you just take it with just a very high level, it's like, this is a story. Well, you know what? Detention just saved you. And there's a lot of details to it, but you know, in reality, that's what it is. You know, one could nitpick and say, well, it's a huge amount of detention. You're not thinking of, you know, we're doing that anywhere else. And that is true. But we're also not trying to deal with a 200-year, 12-hour storm event. That was very unusual. And the fact that it actually did handle a 200-year storm event is pretty remarkable.
You know, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it, but as a way of communicating the importance of, or that benefit of storage. Yeah. Very cool.
So I would, I mean, I've mentioned this a few times. I certainly think this is preliminary. I'd love somebody else to look at it. And if we can get confidence that I'm showing is good, then I think we should use this as a communication tool.
I agree. I like that. Thank you. Any other comments? Cool.
Not on that. I could join the just one picture if we're continuing the Sunday stories.
Sure.
That was, we were driving around just looking at storm drains and seeing if any needed help. They were all pretty clear. And this stood out to me. This is Austin Avenue near the seminary. So the storm drains here are they're backfilling, right? So water's coming out of presumably out of the creek. And that's but this was the one street that struck me as this was in probably around noon, so this wasn't even the worst, or maybe 1 or 2 p.m. Where it seemed clear that residents weren't aware that their cars were going to get flooded. So I was just raising this as, you know, maybe there's some notification or signage in these areas where the storm drains are backflowing during these events, where letting the neighbors know that this and maybe a few other streets, it's time to move your cars to someplace else.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we know what we have to work on in our communications. Thank you. Any other stories? Any other thoughts, comments? Okay.
I just want to thank Eric's both for that. On Madrone Avenue, I think DPW in Nokomis, like DPW came with signs like when it started to flood, but there were or when it was already like definitely underway, there were a lot of people trying to drive through the flooded street leading up to that, you know, and I realized that crews are spread thin, you know, I would be willing to like have a barricade that I could put out right before or something if that would make it easier. But, you know, the when flooded, turn around, don't drown signs like kind of neat, you know, should have been there a couple hours earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, we did have the I can't remember the name, but Sean had us with the patrol, you know, and we had the vests and the shovels and the and I have my shovel and I did go out and look, but we haven't, with COVID, we haven't kind of indoctrinated that. We probably should add that to our to-do list of reinvigorating. I don't remember what Sean called us, but his street people.
Village volunteers.
That's it, village volunteers. which is better than street people.
Well,
Um,
and another thing, we had some leaf problems on catch basins, leaves not letting the water in. But for the most part, there's still a lot of leaves on the trees.
Yeah,
And so one of these next storms is going to be when all the trees decide, okay, we're done with our leaves. And so that's going to be, a big problem, even if it's not a major storm. We may have some localized flooding issues here and there, or, blocked catch basins and things like that. So hopefully we have some village volunteers to go out and take care of some of that stuff. I live in Fairfax on San Anselmo Creek. I'm across the street from it. I'm up in Cascade Canyon. But we have a culvert right in front of my house that takes water across the street. And it got plugged overnight. And so there was a big mud ring on the road. The neighbors went out and unplugged it. And it didn't direct any water into anyone's house, which was good. But it did have, 6 inches, a foot of water on the street. But it's that, my neighbors were out patrolling all day up and down our street, which I thought was really nice of them. And so that's, goes towards the village volunteers and, everybody doing what they can
yeah,
to keep everything moving.
great. Okay, great. And I have moved my screen. I don't remember what's on the next agenda item. Are we?
Future items.
Future items. Anyone have any future items they want to discuss?
I would just back to the CRS element. I mean, we talk about this, I think, every time, but maybe having kind of discrete tasks that we can contribute on for the next meeting would be good. And, I think maybe maybe it is just a Maribel task to start or something, or at least divvying out to us to help out with. But I feel like to help you out, we kind of need to be directed pretty discreetly on get a task in front of us, and we will do it. It's hard to know what that is.
That's fine. So once I receive the CRS or the FEMA people review from the activities I submitted, I can create a list I can send out to you even before our next meeting, just to get ahead of the game, and then we can tackle that.
Yep,
That's
that'd
a
be
good
good.
idea.
And then Scott, to my point about the sirens, I don't even know who makes those decisions. Is there somebody we can talk to? Is that an idea that has traction with other people just than me?
Well, that's one thing that it's been the past practice of the town managers of the 3 towns to blow them at the same time. And to your point, we were getting to the point where our downtown was getting ready to flood, although we've already had, in Gerhardt's neighborhood, a foot of water in the street. And so maybe we need to, like you say, define what it means. And to me, it means, it's flooding downtown and downtown's evacuated. But to other people, it might, maybe it's time now to go move my car. Well, it may be too late to go move your car. You should have done that, several hours before that. So then it becomes, well, do we blow it 2 hours before we expect flooding to happen? So give people time to go move their cars. And then does that mean we're evacuating? So
Yeah.
it does become very problematic. And if we do have a 100-year event and we got 3 feet of water in the street, it's going to be in Ross, it's going to be in San Anselmo, it's going to be in Fairfax. And we've been really lucky with a lot of these storms that they kind of peter out before the major damage happens. We had 3 or 4 events 2 years ago where we, you sounded the horn, evacuated downtown, and luckily there was no water in the streets, but it came really close. And so it's one of those things, 15 more minutes of rain and it all could be different. And we just can't predict that and be, have it be so instantaneous.
Yeah.
That's
And
discussion point, but it would be the town managers. And the other thing is that we have a town manager, Dave Donnery, who's been through this before. Ross has a brand new town manager and Fairfax has an interim town manager until they hire a new one. So they had, two people that hadn't been through it before and were just kind of, looking to us for the process. And the process was, we have the different colors on our flood gauge. When you go to the creek gauge page from the fire department, you can see, what stage the creek is at and kind of what that means. And we have our procedures when it gets to so-and-so level, we take all the town vehicles, we move them over to Andronico's, so we won't have to replace 5 or 6 vehicles plus our personal vehicles, if it does flood downtown. But, and then we have to do this long walk to get them back later. And, but if we did have a 100-year event and, 3 feet of water in the street, then it would have been a good move. So, but it's going to depend on each person figuring out, in their house, what's going to get damaged in their garage. When I worked for San Rafael and I went through the 2006 event, we had somebody who had all this stuff in their garage ruined. And they, as they were mad about it, they said, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time." And I'm thinking, well, then why did you put your vintage guitars on the ground of your garage and not 3 feet up? And you knew it happened before. But there's a lot of also new people that move into town who, yeah, I had to sign this thing and pay this flood thing, and I don't know what this all means. And now my car's ruined, so there is a lot of opportunities for education, but it comes down to like specific people's houses, and then in your neighborhood, Gerhard, the whole neighborhood maybe move their cars, where on Austin Avenue or Ross Avenue, someplace like that, it's, one side of the street, for 4 houses long gets a foot of water on the sidewalk or something. So it can be real specific too.
Yeah, I guess a lot of stuff to think about there. So I think, 2 things just about the flood sirens is, one is communicating what the intent is and being more or less consistent. I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, I know a couple of years ago we had all those false positives, and one could argue that this was slightly a false positive, but I think that's okay. Like, we're doing our best to try to get imminent flooding, but I think if we're consistent with that, and then it means kind of evacuate, and that the creek is going to flood, and then if ideally before that time, what that means for you and your property. So that's a CRS thing, maybe, is just making sure people understand what the siren means and what it means specifically for their property would be good. I seem to be like the community outreach person here. Everyone looks to me when it's about to flood. Oh, do I need to worry about it? Do I need a sandbag? Do I need to do this? And I say the same things over and over again, that it's impossible to predict, because it's a 15-minute intensity storm. That's, no one knows when that's going to happen, yada, yada, yada. So we can discuss that. But but to the specific point though, of having synchronized horns, I'm just not a fan of it. And I would like, if maybe we can add that to the agenda to actually see what this group thinks. And if this group has a recommendation, then maybe the recommendation is to keep it, and that's fine. But if we have a recommendation that we can present to the 3 town managers, it seems like a worthwhile thing for the next meeting.
It was when I was working at the town that practice was enacted, and maybe we could even dig up some archive of the conversation that led to it, because I remember there was a problem during an event kind of like this, that San Anselmo was blowing the horn and Fairfax wasn't, and that was deemed problematic. And so the town managers agreed to all blow it at the same time. It's not like the old long-standing practice, but I don't know the specifics of why.
So I remember that coming up too, and I don't remember the specifics why, but I was skeptical at the time. And maybe I'll be reminded and I'll change my mind. But anyway, if we're open to having a minor agenda item to discuss this next time, that would be good.
Let's do that. Let's add that to the agenda.
And then one other thing to think about with that is, we've been looking at pictures and talking about, property damage, and, and Gerhard, I feel horrible for your whole neighborhood that they had, so much water in there. And I'm sure a lot of garages, got messed up. but we have been very lucky to not have any deaths. And that I think that's, a big concern with, especially in the downtown area with water 3 feet deep going 20 miles an hour with a bunch of people trying to get a look at the creek. If we had a much bigger event and those 10 or 15 people that I did see downtown after it was evacuated got washed away and died, then it really puts things into perspective. Yeah, I had to replace, the old couch that I kept in my garage versus, going to some funerals. And so
Yeah.
the flood horn, although we've had so many close calls lately that it's mostly been about, telling people to move their cars or property damage or things like that. But I think the real underlying reason is to evacuate downtown and save people's lives. And Gerhard, I don't know how fast the water was rushing around your neighborhood, if that's fast enough to knock people off their feet and drag them into the creek, but that's what it is in downtown when it happens.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty close. I think maybe, I don't know if we're going to resolve what the flood horn really means, because I think kind of like we've talked about, it means sort of something different for everybody, but I see it as like a somewhat antiquated communication tool, like we've had this system probably for 30, 40 years before we got all these texts and emails and, all this other information coming at us. But where I see it being really valuable is like in the middle of the night when people aren't paying attention. I think at that point it could save lives. The flood horn in places that are really close to town, you could hear it and wake up and realize like, oh man, my house is flooding. Like I got to get out.
Yeah.
I want to continue the conversation, but I think we probably should, if we do want to have it, we should put it on the next agenda, because
definitely.
These are all good points.
Let's do that. Let's add that to the agenda. Dimitri, we had a hand up. Do we have a hand up?
Oh, that was me, but it's been covered.
Are you sure? All right.
Yeah, sorry. I am.
Okay. Something I would like to add onto the next agenda is, as you know, I've been working on a community-based insurance program, and my stopping block has to date been getting private insurance entities interested in a community-based insurance program. And I'm happy to report that that hurdle has been overcome. And I actually have a new problem in that they think it's a really great opportunity and they'd like to see as many community-based insurance opportunities as we could, as people are interested. And I've done the numbers from San Anselmo early on, and I think that there's an opportunity for us to save about half of what people are currently paying by having a community-based insurance program. So it's something that I'm working with the small town of Ileton. They're moving forward. A part of Sacramento County is moving forward, and having conversations about San Bruno moving forward with a community-based insurance program. So I'd just like to kind of tee that up and put that on the agenda. Any other future items? I think now that COVID is winding down, maybe we think about having another one in a few months, and kind of kick off some of these CRS things that we can do, and maybe have the conversation about the horns.
Yeah. And then we had a meeting last week that was our first hybrid meeting, where we had it in the council chambers with live attendees, as well as people, virtually through Zoom. And I know Dimitri had some technical glitches he worked through, and so hopefully he's figured some of that stuff out. So it may be that our next meeting, we might be able to do a hybrid one and see people in person.
That would be good. Any open time for public expression? Any public comments?
Not seeing any hands raised. We have one member of the public. If you still have any comments, please raise your hand. Looks like no hands are raised, no public comment.
All right. Okay, so next meeting date is so maybe we just pick like 3 months or 4 months from now. Let's see, what is that? February. Let's pick I don't know if there's a date in particular, but if we want to just pick a month, and then maybe Maribel can.
I can send that a doodle poll again with maybe 4 post dates in February or maybe early March or anything about that year.
That would be good. Okay. Any other last minute things before we adjourn? Going once, twice? Okay, with that, I call the meeting to close. Thank you.
Thanks,
To
everybody.
everyone. It's been great to see you all, and thank you so much for all your considerations and great ideas. And now maybe that COVID's getting over, we can maybe be a little more proactive.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.